Not a bad Georgia deer.
It's not a bad anywhere deer.
Feel the weight of it.
Yeah, that's the first thing I do when I pick them up is the weight. It gives you you pick up really tremendous world-class racks. The first thing you notice about them is the weight of them. Canada, in particular, for some reason, the density of those racks is amazing.
Oh, they are.
But typically, I think stereotypically, people think a southeastern deer is small, and this is anything but small.
Well, you know the thing about it, look at the thickness. You know, just the tine length itself, and then the mass through here. For again, we're talking about Georgia deer. That's the biggest deer we've taken off this farm. So
yeah,
not all bad.
And kind of being a bad salesman here, you know, we talk all the time about if all you did was monster meal, it's very unlikely that that deer would achieve what it did. Monster meal can be a tool to help anyone, achieve those results, because it's all of that comes when everything else, all the other needs are met. And you're doing it through habitat, food plots, multi-species habitat, because I can tell there's a lot of turkeys here because it looks like turkey habitat, and that's really the story that we want to hear. I think it just would benefit our people to hear it from you and how each piece fits together.
Yeah,
it's not just one light switch.
Well, this food plot, when we were driving in, those pear trees right there, this deer was underneath those pear trees, and he would come in here and feed on the food plot, and then he'd go to the monster meal, and it was the furthest point away from him, but he would feed all the way to the monster meal. He got a chance to eat 3 or 4 different things before he ever got to the protein feeder.
Yep, and it's a kind of a natural response. The way we developed the pellet was there's a lignin in it that helps develop a rumen mat. Now, when a deer eats a very highly concentrated diet, it needs good woody browse or some sort of lignin to help it digest those high energy foods. So he was doing what he'd normally do is he would eat his carbohydrates and then go browse somewhere. He's got the browse right there, and he goes getting some protein.
No, absolutely. He got everything right here, and he got shot right here.
He got literally everything,
but my 14,
bullet.
Yeah, I was very proud for my 14-year-old. That's a deer of a lifetime for anybody.
Absolutely.
All right, let's go over here and meet up with the guys here. This is one thing we do too. We're always checking on the food plots and it's just a labor of love. Just coming out here and seeing it. I get excited every time I see pear trees and food plot and all the clover popping up, and then obviously coming down here, the protein feeder.
We were talking back at the office about, I defy anyone to find a person who invests in the property that they either lease or own who isn't benefiting everyone around them and the habitat.
Oh, absolutely.
Sometimes feeders or baiting or food plots get a bad rap with certain groups of hunters because it's like a selfish manipulation. But the reality is, if you do this 12 months a year, you're benefiting turkeys, songbirds, everything by being an intensive manager. And you don't have to get super intensive. Like, you guys are kind of the apex of people, but that allows us to talk about the most diverse amount of topics, and it all comes together in one big program. And you showed me a trail cam picture of that particular deer at this feeder. Mm-hmm. Cameras are one of those things where we didn't have them when we were kids. We were waiting for him to break a string.
Absolutely.
And
you just go there and say, I hope he shows up today. I think he's there.
Yeah.
But no, I tell you, technology has just changed. We got you can see the Spartan camera behind it, and we were able to track this deer morning, noon, and night. And obviously timing ourselves, coming in to be able to hunt him. So it all comes together. But we have to do the food plots. The Midwest. We're not geographically, have cornfields and soybean fields and all that. So we have to do the food plots for ourselves, for our wildlife. So
sure.
Tyler, what do you think?
That's what he was like when he died. Right there.
And I'll tell you, that joker right there, every time, he would never approach from that side. He would always have to be looking into the woods, but he'd come from right here every time. I bet 99% of the pictures were on this side looking in. Mm-hmm. Where some of the deer would come on the other side, he wouldn't.
Now, I've noticed you put your feeders right in your other food sources.
Majority of them.
Do you do that for convenience? Do you do that to create movement patterns?
Movement patterns, much as anything, yeah. you know, once they get established to a certain area, you know, it seems like it holds them a little bit better. This holds them during the critical time, you know, during the winter time, you know, when the deer coming off, you know, January, February in bad weather, and then the food plot kicks in. It's just a combination of this for the next 6, 7, 8 months.
Right. So they don't have to change their patterns, and
Too
it's,
much.
you know, they don't have seasonal use patterns where, like where I'm from in upstate New York, deer have to get on south-facing slopes during the winter. It's the only time that they can get enough sun. So, you know, I try to build everything around how do we keep them in one area without over-concentrating deer in a piece of habitat, degrading the habitat. Personally on the farms I manage, I don't put we're dealing with agricultural crops, we're not dealing with, so it's hard to have a feeder with it. They have to go around. But, you know, like our farm in Kentucky, so we put the feeders in different areas. Feeder strategy, we'll probably wind up over the course of the year talking about that, and I may call you and say, hey, I need you to tell them why you do it this way. Again, so.
Well, you know, a neat thing for us, we have 30 plus food plots. And so we pretty much have protein feeders just about on everything. You know, like going to the bus station, everybody shows up there, you know, between the food plots and this, so everybody's got a visual. When the deer comes in, they can see other deer. And so, you know, deer socialize, you know, we know that, you know what I mean? They like being around other deer certain parts of the year. So, you know, we set a social setting, you know, and here they got everything they need food-wise.
Yeah, they become accustomed to
They
the
become accustomed
protein,
to
and
it,
then
yeah.
you know when it's time to have the food plots, it's not like they have to change out their movement pattern or their bedding too much. I mean, it's all kind of right here in this one area.
Right. When you do that, from a management standpoint, competition is viewed as either good competition or bad competition, and most people only see it as bad competition. They don't want competition. But competition is natural within the deer's social structure, and in their behavior patterns. And when you can complement what you're doing to not create negative competition, there's always going to be some. We talked about that one doe that, you know, she'll bed over there, and any deer comes over here, she's going to chase them off.
Right.
Certain times of year they just do that. It's how they survive. But yeah, working totally within, you know, feeder placement and feeder program, working in synergy with everything else you're doing is just so important.
You
And
know,
you don't have to have 30 food plots.
No.
You
Right.
can have one. Exceptional results.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a great, that buck's not getting by. You're going to have to duct tape me to something for me not
Now-
to shoot
now
that deer anywhere in the
Let
world.
me tell you an interesting story on this. My 14-year-old was played football this past fall, and so he couldn't be here a lot of times, you know, with football and school and everything in between. And so Tyler was nice enough to donate, saying, "I'll hunt him if Colton can't hunt him." So he was, you know, that's just being a family guy. You
I'm
know,
your
and-
son too. I'm
Yeah,
your son too.
He said, "We cannot let this deer get away." He said, I'll go hunt him. I said, "Well, let's wait for your little brother, you know, a little bit."
I pushed you to go hunting.
I wouldn't go hunt him. The kids come first, you know. So I've had a lot of opportunities to cross the country, so that was y'all's
And
turn.
I also will say this too about this deer. I mean, I don't think anybody had an idea of how big this deer was. You know, in the last couple of years, I know the big deer I took a couple of years ago, you know, we were all kind of on the downside of guessing what the score was, and I think, you know, this one was a pleasant surprise, but
It was
just
a
the
pleasant
mass of this deer
Yeah.
and what he carries, you know, we were all kind of shocked.
The deer I was lucky enough to kill in Kentucky this year, I really didn't get any chance to hunt. I just we'd transferred ownership of the company and everything. I was so busy. I got to Kentucky and I'd had pictures of that deer. And when we talk about it, it's interesting as people get more and more experience with big deer, they tend to, I don't want to overshoot expectations. So certain groups start to underestimate deer, and it's almost on purpose. Like, I don't want to set that expectation because I'll be disappointed, or I don't want to disappoint someone else. You kind of know when you look at it, you say, "Dadgum, that is a good-looking deer, and he's got the extra stuff." And it's interesting to me socially that we've kind of evolved to that point. Because when I started hunting, if that came out, it wouldn't have mattered. There'd have been a fist fight over who was going to shoot, right? So the other thing, you bring up a point, and I hear it a lot as kind of a negative within the industry is there's a belief out there that because you have cell cameras and there's some perceived advantage. That deer still has to be on its feet in daylight, walking by the stand you're sitting in, and you have to connect on the shot. You know, Bill, you were saying you moved a few times on that deer. And one of the negative perceptions that we want to kind of take away from food plotting and manipulation of habitat and feed is that the deer don't commit suicide just because you do this. They don't. You know, in fact, heavily hunted baited deer are probably some of the hardest deer to kill because once they figure the gig out, they're not coming in daylight.
Amen.
It's a testament to the fact that you can be patient enough and you could keep your other son from shooting a deer.
No,
that
he volunteered. I was very appreciative of him, raising his hands to Dad, I'll go hunt him.
Well, you were showing some really big 8-point genetics
Yes.
at that last feeder.
Yes.
I am the guy that volunteers to eliminate very large 8-point genetics. So if you ever want it to happen, you can call.
Let me tell you, we had an 8-pointer this year that got away from us. We have 2 8-pointers the last 2 years that are bigger than that deer.
Yeah.
And this 8 was just a massive, and we waited too long on putting somebody on him. One of our Tyler or myself or Colton or my daughter. When he left us, he left us.
Yeah.
And we have trail camera pictures of him, and it feeders for the last 3 years.
Yeah.
But he was a lot bigger frame.
And then 2 years ago, about a week and a half before I shot the big deer, opening day, it was kind of a pleasant surprise to see this deer because he had not been on camera the whole summer. But the biggest 8-pointer I've ever seen in person. He was quartering too hard at 25 yards, waiting for him to get broadside, caught our wind, I guess, got out of there. But again, just a testament to I think just all the right ingredients. We've had some big deer the last 3 or 4 years, more than we probably have ever had, in the last 15 or 20.
But like I said, it's taking a combination. One thing I want to point out, we're going to run the 15-acre food plot. These feeders right here, for just people, I know you've seen a lot of feeders. We had those feeders made. They hold approximately, 300, 350 pounds, for this feeder. But what I'm excited about is, for us is we got a couple of feeders we're going to show you that we're working on. And these are prototypes, but we have several out at different food plots. It's going to be UPS shippable, and they're metal, powder coated. The 15-acre field, that one's over there. Let's run over there and show Blake that food plot.
Let's go.
And I want to check it anyway to see.
Yeah.
They just put it out here a couple of days ago.
Sounds good.